Hello, Fiona. You've got a change of scene today.
Do, and I've got no tea.
It's all right. I've got mine.
A coffee cup over there, but I've got no tea. There was a bit of a failing. Sorry.
Never mind, never mind. It's all good. We can survive without the tea. We rarely kind of drink it because we're too busy chatting anyway.
No, I'm at work. I'm at my
Mhm.
place of employment. I'm in my classroom. Behind
Fantastic.
me, behind me, you might be able to see it. No, you probably won't. They've got the bridge and the river and stuff immediately there.
Hmm,
So,
very good. I'm at work as well in my little square that I'm always in. So today we're going to be chatting about emergent language.
we are, yes.
Mhm. Which has kind of, I don't want to say it's seen a resurgence, but it's definitely something that's been talked about a lot recently, but it's certainly nothing new.
No, it's been a resurgence in visibility, should we say, and it's also been slightly renamed because um, it was I mean, I guess it was dogma and then it was unplugged teaching, or it's an element of unplugged teaching. Unplugged teaching was very much about emergent language, as is dogma with an E at the end.
Hmm.
Um, so, yeah, but it's definitely seen a resurgence in visibility. Yeah, it's back among the buzzwords. I hope nobody takes offense at that, but it very much is. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. And I mean, how much of a role would you say emergent language plays in your classroom?
Oof. I want to say 100%. And apologies if you can hear a very loud motorbike. Well, I mean, 25 years ago, so we're in 2026. Yeah, it must be 25 years ago. I became one of the early members of the Dogma group in the days of Yahoo groups, if you remember those, back in the era of MySpace. Um, and it was a group that we set up initially by Scott Thornbury and Luke Meddings. Um, and then there were a few of us. I mean, I can't remember, there were very few of us at the beginning. And women, even fewer. There were like three of us, if that. Sue Murray, there was me, and it Gosh, who was that? Anyway, there was about three of us, and the rest were men. And that had a huge impact on my teaching. At that time, I lived in the Canary Islands and I had left a job as the head of studies in this big school and I was freelancing and I didn't have a staff room. And so it kind of became my online staff room. In fact, that's why I joined because I saw Scott somewhere in the Canary Islands and he suggested I join. So and just set it up. So that became my staff room and exchanging ideas. I didn't really have any materials at that time. I was teaching in like huge rooms with maybe one electric socket and like everybody in the village in the same class, that sort of thing. So dogma, as it was called at that time, dialogue driven or conversation driven, really, and emergent language and using all my teaching experience because even then, I already had, I guess, 15 years experience. Um, that very much informed my practice at that point. And because it worked and I saw how effective it was, that then when I went back into, uh, should we say, a more traditional teaching school, I mean, I went to work at IH Seville and I had a very good director of studies called Colin Dobson, if you happen to see this, who pretty much allowed me to teach in my way rather than telling me that I had to follow a course, but particularly with um, the repeating students, the difficult teenagers as they were called, and I didn't find them difficult at all, and they progressed much more quickly using dogma.
Mhm.
They jumped two levels. So since then, really, it's just. And this morning we've been doing. I could turn the computer around. You see all the notes on the table, but they've been using.
I mean, I think probably a lot of teachers do take this sort of approach that, nowadays a lot of us are trying to get as much as we can from the students. I'm still at the stage where I feel nervous going into the room with nothing.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And you don't want to say that you feel like you're not doing your job because obviously with experience, you can go in and do nothing,
Yeah.
go in with nothing, but still there's that kind of
Do nothing is
fear.
not. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's being able to use or teach using emergent language when you need experience. I guess if you're if you're a novice teacher at a squeeze, you could do it. You'd have to have fairly clear strategies for yourself. I think this is perhaps what, in its purest sense, dogma was weak at, was it did require quite a lot of experience behind, because people did just walk it, and to differentiate between that and winging it,
Mm,
to have, yeah. Um, in the emergent language movement, it's not quite as free on the structural sense. So you go in with a plan. Like this morning, I came with a plan, but I elicit most of the elements of the plan from the students. On the board at the moment, we did a visualization activity. So, I came into the room, I selected the tunes last night, I emailed myself the links. I went through that element of the plan. In fact, my students saw my plan because I didn't realize my entire plan was being beamed onto the screen. Anyway, and so on the board at the moment it says cities, buildings, nature, trees, temperature. Because I said to them, "What do you notice when you go to new cities?" We wrote that on the board. Listen to the music, and they visualized following their structure that they had come up with themselves, and then they've written the language that they need, and they wrote it in Japanese and in English, and then we were just translating before, and then they were starting to tell each other about what they'd visualized. But I think if you're a new teacher, to have it go in with a structure, you can, but you also have to have the, I don't know if it's confidence or just the personality to be flexible and go, okay, that didn't work.
mhm, mhm,
Let's do this instead. And I always have a plan B just in case. Um, so although dogma used to be criticized for being like a cop out, teachers didn't plan, they just went in. I find I end up doing two plans. So it's almost more rather than less. I do
mhm,
less perhaps in the classroom,
mhm, mhm,
but I do more at the prep stage because I need a plan B. And generally speaking, the emergent one is more effective and it's more memorable and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't always work.
mhm. Yep.
Usually does, though. Usually does. 98% of the time it does.
I think it can often depend on the students as well, because sometimes you do get groups of students who, and I saw a wonderful phrase from a teacher this morning. I'm not going to be able to pronounce the word, but changing students' epistemological beliefs about kind of what the role of a teacher is.
Right.
Like is the teacher the person that goes in and tells you everything?
Yeah.
And so for some students, going in with this approach of, okay, so
Yeah.
what are we going to talk about today? That really kind of shocks them as well.
But I guess it's timing as well. I wouldn't do this, like what I've been doing today, I wouldn't do that in the first week. It's
Hmm.
all about you've got to create the classroom culture first. You've got to, my students are all coming from extremely transmissive teaching approaches. Um, I don't mean that as a critique of like Japanese schools or anything, but they're at university, and UK universities are the same. Most classes or whatever at university are in a lecture
Yeah.
style. Yeah. So they come here and they get something completely different, and it's not, because we've got the tutorial system and we've got, so, but they have to be eased into that sort of mental space or mindset. Now, this
Mm.
is second term now, so I can leap about with this. We did uh, the dance party, as I call it, which is one of the learning tree activities it's in our book. But I did it with them the first week we were back after Christmas, so they're already kind of getting the feeling that this term is going to be a bit different. But I also think, today I did plan double because it's Monday.
Hmm.
We're recording on a Monday for a Tuesday, guys. I just let it out in the bag, but it's Monday. So, Monday mornings don't always go to plan,
Hmm.
you know.
Yep, definitely not. No, no.
Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, in terms of emergent language, so how much do you feel you're just kind of taking words that the students don't have and feeding them that language? And how much do you feel it's taking what they say and then upgrading it?
Oh yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Um, I just mentioned the language tree, the learning tree. I can't even think of my own terminology. Um, and this is something that we named, or I named, whatever, in our book. That for me, effective learning is like a tree. You have to build on the roots. The roots is what they've already got.
Hmm.
So you start with that, and you've got to activate that first, and then you may have a target language. Me, in my case today, I didn't have target language. I had target skills. I wanted them to be able to open or expand their vocabulary. That was basically my target. It's and to be able to discuss things fluently. We were doing some pronunciation and whatever. So the kind of the stuff that was in my head before wasn't so much language. And then the branches of the emergent, the language that they come up with that they need to use. So it's what they've got, what they need, and what they want are the
Hmm.
three, the roots, the tree trunk, and the leaves. I wish I could show you a picture of a tree, but everybody knows what a tree looks like. Roots, roots, what they've got, trunk, what they need, and leaves and branches and all that. The emergent language, leaves, because leaves fall off. So
Hmm.
we don't know, we don't keep all of the stuff. Um, I forgot what your question was, but never mind.
So it was about kind of feeding in what they're missing and
Yeah, well, this is
upgrading what
it.
they already
So,
have.
yeah, exactly. So I need to find out what they're missing first. I need to activate what they've got.
Hmm.
Um, and then, so it's the same thing in a sense, isn't it? You've got to activate what they've got and then you feed in. And I do it by, in this case, is visualization. And I tell them they can take their notes in Japanese or English. And, if they know it, write it in English. If they don't, write it in Japanese, because I don't want them to limit the visualization.
Hmm.
And also because that Japanese is what becomes the emergent language. And, I'm going around peeking over their shoulders and I can see who's written, like a couple of students wrote just about everything in Japanese, and then a couple wrote nearly everything in English, but then you put them into groups to work together to fill in the gaps
Hmm.
themselves first. And then we use dictionaries and whatever. My Japanese is minimal. Let's say it's an A1, A1 plus, so I can't really help with things like, I'm going to look at my board. We had light streams in.
Mm.
We had the difference between a crossing and a crossroads. We've got menacing and threatening on the board. This is stuff that came out because, they say, I want a word like dangerous, but it's more ooh than dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay, menace. So this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's like take what they've got and go whoosh,
Hmm.
make the
Hmm.
tree grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as well, in terms of taking what they've got, also sharing that
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the class, that idea of that was a really good phrase. Like, let's put that on the board so
Well,
that
that's what I've got on the
everyone,
board. Yeah, that's it. We're
yeah.
going to finish this afternoon because then when they're doing the speaking on the writing stage, it will expand more. So it's every new thing that they've got, they've shared with their little groups. And then I say, okay, what new stuff? And we put it on the board.
Hmm.
And you remember we were talking about color the other day? Well, we've started, I don't know if you can see, but there's red over there is what we put before the listening, the music.
Nice.
And then the green is the new stuff,
Hmm. Hmm.
green leaves and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean,
What
because
about
this is,
you?
well, so I was just thinking, I do quite a lot of conversation classes. They're really small groups. And in terms of preparation, I go in, I find a video, and then I'll do some questions around the video, kind of, but more personal opinion, personal experience. And so then I just switch off and listen to their conversations. And then, like I say, it tends to be a lot of upgrading,
Yeah.
because they're all generally C1, even C2 learners. And so, they already have a really good range, sharing the good language that they come out with each other as well, or not necessarily that they didn't understand when it was part of the conversation, but just to kind of highlight it so that it encourages the others to make it part of their active vocabularies. Um, but yeah, lots of I heard this, you could say this as well, rather than correcting that was wrong, which a lot of the time it isn't. But
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of, oh, and here's another. Because I got to feel like I'm teaching these C2 learners something as well.
I know. Well, I get them to teach this morning. They were teaching each other as well, and they were teaching. In fact, I got one of the students to start the lesson, and she said she needed 15 minutes to do it. And it was an hour, so she had an hour teaching. That was quite good, and that was she had decided she'd chosen some phrases from a text that we had the other day. And again, you've got emergent language coming into that because she's chosen the phrases, but then they're finding out she gave us two phrases each to teach. And then, of course, when they're looking up English to prepare to teach, then they have it's like that. Oh, I didn't know that word either. Like, it's like in order to explain or communicate the meaning of disruptive technology, push the envelope. We had crash and burn, these sort of things, and that had all come out of a text that she'd been reading. Yeah, I think getting the students to do as much as possible.
Yeah,
As I say, that sounds like a cop out. It's not. We do the planning, but
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah. And I think it's really empowering as well for
mm,
them to, for you to share language that they've brought to the lesson as well.
yeah, yeah,
And I
definitely.
think we mentioned as well before, kind of making a point when you know it's something that hasn't come up in your lesson. It's like, oh, that's really good. Where did you hear that from?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Encouraging that learner autonomy as well.
yeah. We had the first lesson this morning. We had a thing about how one small word can make a difference. And that came from a conversation that I had with a student. And then I overheard a conversation between two students. The one between two students was the difference between to go to dance. I'm going to dance and I'm going to the dance. So sort of sticking in the. And then
Mm.
this guy had got himself in a pickle between I'm going to the pub and I'm going to pub kind of thing. So we worked on how putting that the in can change the meaning of the sentence.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
on the back of that, I pointed out a conversation that I'd had with a student where poor guy, I terrified him. I said, let's go and hunt for peacocks. And he understood hunt peacocks and he thought we were going to go and kill peacocks. Um, and so it was the difference, but and I hadn't see hadn't occurred to me before the difference between hunt for and hunt.
Hmm.
That was emergent, and it would honestly, it's not in any books. And we say hunt for Christmas
Hmm.
presents for both. We hunt for stuff quite a lot.
Hmm.
Hopefully, we hunt things less frequently. But it's that how one small word can make a huge difference. And I think that's the beauty of Emergent. It does really address the needs. And that hunt for thing, done, I hadn't dealt with it. I dealt with it with one student at the time, but then I've
Hmm.
put it together with this, how one small word
Yeah.
can make a big difference. So it's still emergent, but you save up and you come back to it later on. You
Mm.
get stuff like that from written work as well. Makes our teaching more relevant, when we're correcting the written and we use the common issues as the basis for our grammar teaching or our whatever,
Yeah.
language accuracy teaching, rather than, oh, the course book says it's present perfect, so we got to do the present perfect again. It's B2, but let's do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we'll get to teaching tenses and teaching
Yeah,
grammar in another one.
no, we will, but it's. I think students appreciate when they see that our teaching comes from their needs.
Mm.
It's not just that we are addressing their needs, it's that they see we're addressing their needs
Hmm.
rather than just following, uh, syllabus that came from somewhere else.
Yep. Yep. Excellent. Well, as it's a Monday lunchtime, I think we're both going to rush off and get some lunch before we carry on with our afternoon classes. Uh,
Yeah.
so, if you're watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, whichever way that is, and we'll be back again next week.
And we'll tell you how this afternoon's emergent lesson went, because it is the whole lesson is emergent this afternoon.